Look, thanks for your kind words, and thank you all for inviting me along. And nice to see so many familiar faces on a bit of a wintry night, but it's actually not too bad in here, is it? I think last time I came, I had a beanie on, it was that cold, so it's quite comfortable. So what I'm going to do, of course, is talk about the history of our business, where it started, and go through it. I'm going to go right from the beginning, go right up to where I left off last time. I think it was about, 7 or 8 years ago, I think I did the last talk. So I'll concentrate more on the last bit of that. And then I'll talk about the closure of the garden centre and what's happened there. So, you know, everyone's got an opinion or a story or a rumour. So you'll hear it from the horse's mouth. So every day I hear something different. I mean, the other day that my daughter heard, she works at the garden centre at the checkout. Oh no, your dad sold, I know you're selling this because your dad died. And you and your two sons, Milton's two sons are selling it. And Astra thought that was quite funny because I've got a daughter and a son. So there's lots of rumours getting around there. So look, we're going to have a bit of a slideshow, and my sister Margaret is the keeper of all of that information, so she's put the slideshow together. It's in rough chronological order. So we start out at Rosedale and we come to the Gawler site and etc. So I haven't seen all of those, so it might be interesting. Perhaps if you really need to ask me a question about some of the photos, perhaps we'll do a bit of a question and answer thing at the end rather than stopping and starting and I'll forget what I'm talking about like Barney. I'm not going to talk about citrus, so I'm not going to answer any questions about lemons, all right? That's a bit of a joke because every time I'm on radio or whatever, on TV, you know, the question that gets asked the most is why is my lemon going yellow? They're supposed to go yellow. All right. Okay, so let's start. I like to move around a lot, but I have to keep still for this one, so that's going to be quite difficult for me, but I'll do my best. So our business was born out in the Barossa Valley at a little hamlet called Rosedale, or it used to be called Rosenthal before that. That started out there in 1960 by my late mother and father, Parry and Denise Vadoulis, and I know many of you would know them very well. But prior to that, if I go backwards a step further or two, my mum and dad immigrated to Australia from Greece in the late 50s, and then Dad started his horticultural working life at a nursery many of you will know very well, Lascaux Garden Centres. He worked on the Henley Beach Road site with John Lascaux as his boss. And then while Dad was working there, he also rented a block of land where the airport is now. And he used to grow olives and citrus there before he moved out to Rosedale. So he used to do that and then sell them off to Lascaux, you know, on the weekends. So that's how it all started. Now, John Lascaux, many of you may not know him, but know of him, had several garden centres around the state and was the biggest nursery business in the state by far. And when Dad told John that, look, John, I'm going to leave and start my own business, John was horrified because he didn't want to lose Dad. Dad was a very good worker and very dedicated. And he gave Dad some advice, which was really good, and it's relevant today as well. And he said to Dad, he said, look, Parry, I'm just going to give you a little bit of advice that anyone can grow plants, but it's the hardest thing to sell them. And how right he was, and how true it is today. You know, over the last year, I've come up with a phrase for our type of business, and that's the nursery business. I call it the Goldilocks business. And you know why? Because everything has to be just right. Can't be too wet, can't be too hot, can't be too cold, it can't be raining, it can't be snowing, it can't be hailing. It's got to be just right. So the business works when it's 22 degrees to 28 degrees. If you look on your calendar, you'll see how many of those you have. Not too many. Anyway, so let's go back to Rosedale now. So 1960, he purchased the property at Rosedale. And why did we go to Rosedale? This is Rosedale here. Because that's the only place he could afford a couple of acres of land. You know, he lived at Henley there. They rented in fact, they were in a share house with an English couple called the Hunters. And Mum and Dad shared a house with them, and they were very good to Mum and Dad. And they went out to Rosedale, bought 2 acres, and Dad tells the story about, you know, going out there and meeting all the local farmers. Is anyone here from Rosedale that... No, okay, so I can tell the story. But no, it's not a bad story, but you know, he went to the, not CWA, the Agricultural Bureau there for a meeting, and they all said, "Oh, Parry, what are you doing? You've got a couple of acres there." And he said, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to grow plants." And they all laughed at him, because they were all broad acres, and said, "You can't make money on 2 acres. So anyway, so that was the history of how it started. So Dad, we started as a production nursery. Production nursery was growing the plants and then selling them wholesale to a retail nursery, which is what we are today. So he started off by producing plants, growing citrus, lots of deciduous trees and fruit trees. And in those days, they were all grown in the ground. And so you get the orders, and people don't realise this, but it still happens today. So when I order fruit trees, I've ordered them 18 months ago before they come. So Dad got his orders 18 months before, took 18 months to grow the trees, and then his first order, he was so proud, he dug them all out of the ground by hand. My gosh, I don't think I could do that at any time in my life. Such hard work. So he got it all ready. He rings up the nursery that had placed the order. He had a signed copy of the order. And I can mention who it is now. I've sort of avoided it over the years, but it was Peter Engel's nursery. A lot of you will know of Peter Engel. Peter Engel just passed away, sadly, last year. He was a great friend of the family's. But Peter said to my dad, "Oh, Parry, oh gosh, oh yes, I did order them from you, didn't I?" He said, "But I've ordered them elsewhere." And Dad, being Dad, said, "That's okay, Peter, I'll sell them." So he was stuck with, you know, thousands of trees, no income for 12 months. Well, he did make some money. He worked for the farmers carting hay and stuff like that. So he had his whole 18 months' work sitting in a pile at the nursery at Rosedale. So what did he do? He went to the local paper, which was the Leader. Sorry, he didn't know where Gawler was, Barney. And he put an ad in the paper. And he said, "Plants for sale." And that's how the retail side of our business developed. Okay, so a lot of people from the Barossa, we were very well patronised. People came from everywhere and bought the plants. And then, of course, what happens when you've got a group of plants, let's say he grew 20 species, what happens? Paul will come in and say, "Well, I want a banana tree." "Oh, I don't grow banana trees, I better get some." And he started going around buying stock and having a range of stock to sell. He still grew plants, roses, fruit trees, right up until we moved to Gawler. So that's how the business started. And in those days, there was a lot of door-to-door salespeople. In fact, I remember still the baker coming past every day with the baker's cart, and Mum going out there and buying bread. That's how everything was bought. And Dad used to have a guy came out, his name was Frank Lord. I'm not sure any of you would know Frank. Frank Lord used to be the general manager of Woodroof's in Adelaide. And when Frank retired, he bought himself a van, and he did door-to-door plant sales. So he used to go to all the farms around, you know, everywhere, up to Clare and Burra, and sell plants. So he used to come to Dad's place and buy the plants wholesale from Dad, put them in his car, and off he'd go and sell them. So they developed a friendship. And Frank was a very clever man, but getting old. And Dad felt a bit sorry for him. He said, Frank, look, I've got an idea. What if I buy a place in Gawler? I've been thinking of buying a place there, starting up a nursery there, and you can run that for me. And Frank said, oh yeah, that'd be awesome. So that's how the idea for the Gawler business started. Because any of you would know where Rosedale is. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's still out in the middle of nowhere. In those days it was out in the middle of nowhere. So to try to create a retail business, you have to be in a really good location. So Mum and Dad went, and it was Mr. Darlenberg was a real estate agent. I can't remember his first name. He was, the Darlenbergs lived at Rosedale, so it was Mrs. Darlenberg's nephew or something. Anyway, irrelevant. He took them around Gawler and showed them all the properties that were for sale. Oh, this one over here's for sale, Denise and Parry. Mum said, no, don't like that. Showed him another one, no, don't like that. Showed him another one, no, that's no good. And so they were driving back to their Gawler office, and they drove past the race course and saw this property on the right there. Mum said, that's the one I want. And he said, that's not for sale, Mrs. Vadoulis. She said, but that's the one I want. So I said, look, I know who owns that, I'll go and see them. So anyway, he went to see Max Day, and Max Day wasn't keen to sell it, but was willing to sell it at a price. So the short story is, they ended up buying it. He'd agreed to sell it to them, but it was 4 times its value. So they paid 4 times more than what it was valued. But in hindsight, what a good investment. So the business, it took many years so they bought that in the late 60s, I can't remember, haven't got the dates in front of me, the late 60s, and then started to develop it. You know, it was just a paddock, no houses anywhere except the slaughter yard behind there that Max Day ran. And anyway, he put the big driveway in, put some shade houses, and big fences and what have you, and started and opened in 1969. And that's how the business started. So for some time, and we had a caravan there as an office. Some of you may remember that, if your memories are good. We used to live in that sometimes, you know, because we lived at Rosedale, it was quite a long way to go from one to the other. So we stayed in the caravan at some times, and it was freezing. I still remember it was freezing. Anyway, so we were running both businesses, the Rosedale business as well as the Gawler side, for quite some time. And then Frank was starting to get a little bit old, so Dad had to make the decision, what do I do? He couldn't run both of them, so he ended up saying, well, let's shut down Rosedale, because the Gawler site is the site with the most potential. So he ended up closing that site and just concentrating on the Gawler site. This is the Gawler site here, and you can see the wrecked shade cloth. One of the things we've had several times is total annihilation of the nursery by wind and hail, and this was one time. This was the first one in the 70s. In the early 70s, yeah. So we moved the garden centre to Gawler. And at the same time, Dad was still a production nursery, growing many trees in containers as well as out in the yard, in ground. He grew roses in the ground, poplars and things like that that were popular at the time. And in those days, certainly at Rosedale, I remember I'm not sure how old I was, maybe 5 or 6, and all plants were either grown in terracotta pots or old paint containers. So you used to get a load of old paint containers, and I used to have to put the holes in the bottom of them. Slave labour, really, isn't it? But anyway, so you grew a lot of plants in the ground as well. And when we'd moved to the nursery all to Gawler, we still lived at Rosedale. So we were travelling back and forth a fair bit. But Dad wanted to build a house there, and he couldn't afford, well, the bank wouldn't lend him any more money, and so he had to make the money all up very quickly. So he thought to himself, right, I'm going to grow 40,000 roses this year in the ground. So he grew 40,000 roses out the back of Gawler there, and you wouldn't believe it, that year he didn't sell one rose. He piled them all up in a heap and burnt them. So I don't know if you know how much work's involved in 40,000 roses. It's a terrible job.
Why didn't he sell them? Sorry.
Why didn't he sell them? With the rose market, it fluctuates. You have one good season, one bad season. Or one good season, two bad, or the other way around. So that's why. Yeah, it was a bit of a shame. He sort of hung his hat on that one, but anyway, that's just another thing in our history. So anyway, many years later, he managed to make enough money to build a house on the site. After some time, Dad got a little bit sick of, Dad and Mum worked every day of their lives, and they didn't, have days off at all. So Dad started to get a little bit fatigued in the early 70s. So we had a great employee called Kevin Eckert. I don't know if any of you remember Kevin? Yeah, lovely gentleman. And he worked for us, and he was talking to Dad one day, and Kevin said, "Parry, why don't I take over the business?" And they talked about it for a while, and the short story is Kevin ended up leasing the business off of Dad for 4 years, which worked out very well because Dad went to the part that he loved most, which is the production side, and was producing plants instead of being at the coalface selling plants. So Kevin leased the business, I think it was from 1974 until 1977. At that point in 1977, Kevin said to Dad, "Look, I'm going to leave and start my own nursery now." So Dad obviously couldn't do anything about that, so Kevin went up the road, and I think opposite what used to be Monia Bessa, I think many of you remember there was another nursery that Kevin started there, which was called Kevin Eckert's Nursery. So at that point, I was 16 and at school. My ambition was not to run a nursery. Many people will be quite surprised that my ambition was to be an electronic engineer, because that's what I really had a passion for and love. I was always tinkering with wires and resistors and radios and speakers and stuff like that. Anyway, Dad being a very strong Greek man, "You're going to leave school and come and work the nursery." "No, I'm not." Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. Yes, I did. So I thought to myself, okay. So I thought to myself, okay, what? Come on, Milton. I thought I'll do it for 10 years. I'll give it 10 years. 10 years will go past really quick. And then I'll go and do something else later. Anyway, so the business had pretty much not shut down, but was moved. Kevin took everything with him, so we had to start from scratch. So I had to go with my parents as guarantors to the bank and borrow money to start this business, because Dad wanted me to do it. Okay, I knew nothing about running a business. So we went to the bank, and my parents go on guarantor. I borrowed some money, bought plant and equipment and everything, and that's how it started. So obviously the first few years I had a lot of guidance from my parents, but as many of you may know, I'm actually quite stubborn. Got that from my mum and dad's side. So I wanted to do things my way very early. But I must say I developed a passion for the business very quickly. Plants are beautiful things to work with. They're so diverse and so interesting. And I often tell people this story. When it was in the early years, the first year or so, we used to sell native plants in tubes. You would have all seen them a million times. But in those days, it was a really big market. And all of these trays, hundreds of trays of different eucalypts would come in. And I'd look at them and I think, they all look the same. But they're all different. So I thought to myself, I've got to learn this. And I've got to learn it really quick, because everyone's coming in saying, I want a Eucalyptus citrodora or a Cladocalix nona. And to me, they all look the same. So I thought to myself, right, Milton, you've got to learn this. So every day I went and I looked and I studied the plant, and I learnt 4 every day until I knew them all. And then I thought, well, I need to do a bit more than just to look at plants, and I need to know how they work and everything. So I was very fortunate. The Adelaide Botanic Gardens used to run a diploma course for their trainees there. And each year they would allow half a dozen non-Botanic Garden students to study with them. You had to apply and you had to be working in the industry, and I was very lucky to be accepted into that course. It was a 4-year course, and it was done at the Adelaide Botanic Gardens, which was absolutely amazing because it was lovely being there and working and learning. We had the Anne Prescott, the botanist from the Adelaide University, who taught me many things, soil scientists from the university, climatologists and landscape designers, so it was a real in-depth course. So after that, it set me up to learn more about plants. Anyway, so I graduated in the mid-80s, and then lots of things start to change. You know, your mind opens up to lots of different things. But of course, gardening is not just about growing a couple of plants, a fruit trees, a patch of lawn. Gardening in the late 80s became a fashion. So you had to look at fashion as well. And you'll see over the years, you know, if we go back to our parents or grandparents, you can see the yard, can't you? A few fruit trees down the back, a big patch of lawn, Mum had some roses out the front. That was pretty much every yard. And the incinerator in the corner. Oh, she's listening to me, sorry. So that started to change. We had native plants being popular. So everyone wanted native plants in the gardens, didn't they? You all remember planting Tasmanian blue gums in the front garden and Melaleuca armillaris? That was the first lot of fashion that I saw. Then we went into lots of different gardens, you know, formal gardens and what have you. So at that time I started to look wider and see what the rest of the world was doing. What are the nurseries in Europe doing? What are they doing in America? So I went travelling and having a look what the rest of the world did. And I brought back some ideas that changed the industry in Australia. So some of the stuff, obviously, that they were doing around the world is having gifts in garden centres. Because remember what I said earlier, our business is Goldilocks. Plants sell twice a year. Spring, down in summer, and up in autumn. So what we had to do, or what I had to do, is flatten that curve. So there wasn't these two bumps in it. So we started selling gifts and other things associated to the garden that made it interesting for people to come back in. I opened one of the first cafes in Australia in a garden centre. And that, of course, brings people in. Oh, we'll go and have a coffee. Oh, gee, that plant looks good. This plant looks good. I'll buy that. That's what that created. Then after that, outdoor furniture. I started outdoor furniture. I would say I was the first garden centre in Australia to sell outdoor furniture. And of course now, these days, it's a large category of ours. So you always had to look into the future and look at what other people are doing. You know, it's no use reinventing the wheel. It's best to use other people's ideas, and that's what I did. And then, of course, we come to the early 2000s. And what happened there? Can anyone remember? Drought. There was a drought. You couldn't use water. You had to let your lawns die. What do you think happened to our business? Straight down. So, and again, that's when I concentrated more on the outdoor furniture, importing pots and things that were associated to the garden, but not necessarily green life. And that helped prop up our business for some time. So as I said, it's a fashion business. So what happened after the drought? The drought went for quite a few years. So then everyone's gardens were dead, weren't they? So everyone got sick of dead gardens and they wanted to have greenery. So that's when the succulent fashion started. All succulent or hardy plants and natives became very popular as well. So that fashion changed. So we had to regroup what type of plants we grew. Now remember, we were still a production nursery until the early 90s. So we grew 80% of our own stock at the site in Gawler. So what happens when fashions change so quickly? You need to be able to click your fingers and get that product today or tomorrow. So we had to buy a lot more stock. So as fashions changed quicker, we used to grow less and less because plants take years to grow. Fashions happen in 6 months. So we had to look elsewhere for all those products because we couldn't grow them quick enough. So eventually, in the early 90s, we closed the production nursery down at Gawler and concentrated more on the retail side of it. And that meant sourcing plants and products from all over Australia and the world. Certainly plants are only bought from Australia, but other products like furniture and pots, we travelled around the world to find those. You know, Vietnam for pots and China for furniture, Indonesia for wooden furniture, places like that. So changes happened very quickly. Now I mentioned also that Mum picked this site because it was so brilliant. But it was also our Achilles heel. Why would you say that, Milton? Because the government have a thing called land tax. And land tax on that site has been killing us for 20 years. So, about 10 or 12 years ago, I started talking to a couple of the local real estate people, and I said, I need to find a new site. This is too expensive to stay here. we're talking really big numbers here. It's not $10,000 or $20,000. It's huge money. It's huge. It's obscene money. So I started looking at about 10 or 12 years ago for another site. Now, let me tell you, finding a site to build a business on in Gawler is near impossible, especially if you're looking for quite a big site, because garden centres need quite a large area to operate from, because we don't stack plants. It's not like a supermarket where there's 4 shelves. Plants are on one level, so we need this large footprint to operate on. Anyway, we found a few that we thought we might be able to use, and then unfortunately in the late teens I actually found out I was quite sick, so we had to put a hold on that. And I was just sort of waiting. I had a condition called myelofibrosis, which is a condition, because I'd never heard of it. I'm sure none of you have either. It's very rare. Of course it'd have to be rare. It's a condition where your bone marrow stops producing, it becomes fibrous. And if it becomes fibrous, it stops producing blood cells. So basically I was running out of blood. And there was nothing they could do at the time. It said just have to wait until you run out of blood, or you not run out of blood, but get to the point where they had to do a transplant. So we had to look for a suitable donor. I was very fortunate that one of my sisters was a good match, and we just had to wait for the time. In 2018, I went to see my haematologist, and he said, your numbers are bad, you need a transplant soon. So within 6 months, in 2019, I had a bone marrow transplant at the Royal Adelaide, and I was talking to Kay earlier about, you hear a lot of horrible stories about the health system. I tell you what, if you're in the health system, it's a fantastic system. It's brilliant. The people are brilliant, the nurses, the doctors, the facilities are second to none. I cannot complain. Anyway, I was very fortunate that I got out of hospital reasonably quickly. I was out of hospital within 5 weeks, which was brilliant. But of course I was immunocompromised and had to stay home. I couldn't walk on grass, I couldn't walk on soil. I had to stay in a very sterile environment at home. So anyway, and we all know what happened in 2020. Just as I was not really recovered, in fact I wasn't recovered at all. It's taken me 4 years to, or 5 years, sorry, 4 years to become completely medication free, and I can say, touch wood and thank everything I can, that I'm doing really well. So anyway, so why does that matter? Because at this point, both of my kids are working in the business as well. My daughter Astra and my son Ari were in the business, and it's wonderful to have them there every day with me. So you try to plan for the future. My father did it. He was at Rosedale, moved to Gawler. That was the next step. So I had to look at the next step to go to the future with my children. So the next step, unfortunately, could not remain on that site for obvious reasons that I've spoken about. So we were still looking for another site. So to do that, we had to sell that site and get enough money to be able to afford to relocate to another site and build a state-of-the-art garden centre there, which I would have loved to have done. I've got so many ideas and bits of paper all over my office with the indoor section needs to be like that, the flow needs to be this way, the car park needs to be there, blah, 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 the cafe's got to be there, all of those sorts of things. Anyway, so we were fortunate enough, everyone thought, oh, you had it on the market. We've never had it on the market, but we were approached by a development company which was interested, and we thought, okay, this might work. Anyway, so they made a reasonable offer to do the same sort of thing as what we're doing there now. And that's what we needed to sell it for, because otherwise we couldn't afford to buy something else to do the same thing. Anyway, I think most of you are aware of the dramas that we've put up with, and the long story, or the short story, is that was disapproved and didn't go ahead. That process took 4 years. So I had estimated 4 years ago it's going to cost me $4 million to buy a new place and build a new state-of-the-art garden centre. What do you reckon it is today? It's $8 million. At $4 million, it wasn't viable, but it was worth doing for the future. At $8 million, I'm stupid. I probably am. Do you know what I mean? So that's a decision that the decision of other people has made us close down, because there's no other option. We can't afford to be paying ridiculous taxes and stay on that site. It's just not viable. I'm at the age now where we've spent 4 years, $800,000, and we're nowhere. What am I going to spend another 4 years, another $1 million, and still might be nowhere? I'm a gambler, but I'm not stupid. So that's the decision why the business is closing down. It's very disappointing for me. I was talking earlier to Karen there. She said, it must be very sad. It is very sad. It's a very difficult thing to do, to walk around the place and say, Milton, this is what you're going to do. In fact, sorry, I'm getting emotional now. In fact, before I made that decision, I went to a very good family friend of ours. His name's Quentin Woolard. He's Wollaston, sorry. He's got a nursery at Deep Creek called Raywood Nursery. And I would highly recommend, if you like plants, you should go to Raywood Nursery. He is a nurseryman, like the old people. You will go there and it will be like going to our Rosedale site. It will be the same, but he's a plant passion man. So he's been a friend of the family for many years, and him and Dad were really good friends. They were swapping plants. Oh, Dad, Parry, how'd you grow that? Oh, I did this. Oh, what do you got there? How'd you do that? They were really good mates. They used to go fishing together. They used to come for Christmas dinners and stuff. So I went to see Quentin. I hadn't seen him for many years, and I saw him the year before I went. And he was pleased to see I was doing well. So I was walking around. Quentin's 90-something and still working. I went and he's pushing a barrow of plants around. And he saw me and he comes and gives me a big cuddle and, "Hey Milton, how are you doing? Well, that's really good." So we went for a walk around his property. It's a beautiful property. It's full of native scrub and beautiful native birds and everything. And he takes me out to his back dam. He really is proud of that. We sat down on a log and looking across the lake with the birds and what have you. And I said, "Quentin, I'm thinking of closing the business." And Quentin sort of did this and said, and he looked down, and he was cutting some gladiolis actually. And he took a few minutes and he said, "Milton, what do you think your dad would say about that?" And I said, "Quentin, I think he'd be disappointed." And he cut a few more gladdies. He was cutting some flowers for someone down in the nursery. So it took a bit more time. And he looked up at me, and we went for a walk back to the nursery, and he said, "Milton, I think he'd understand." So with that, I needed someone to tell me that that was okay. And Quentin, having been there right from the start, from the genesis of our business, I think Dad would think that's okay. So that was a difficult decision that I made. And it's still, I walk around there when we close the gates. I did it yesterday. Walk out the back and I look across at our production area that's no longer in use. And I think, wow, in a blink of an eye, that time has gone. And it is sad. It is sad for me.
Sad for us all, still.
Yeah, and but what can I do? We can't afford to stay there. The place, as far as infrastructure is concerned, is ageing. It needs rebuilding. It needs a lot of money spent on it. You can't spend it on there and have to pay those sorts of rates. There was nowhere for me to go except that. Our way out was to sell it and be able to afford to build something fresh and new. Clearly that didn't happen, and unfortunately Gawler will lose its last remaining garden centre. And I can tell you now, I doubt very much that you'll ever have another one here because of the cost involved in building one and maintaining it. Remember, as I said, it's a Goldilocks business. You've got to be mad or super, super keen on both. So that's where we have landed with today. So, I've had a very wonderful ride. I've enjoyed, not every day, but most days have been awesome. I get up every day, I jump out of bed, and I'm down there. It's not work to me. I really do enjoy it. I enjoy the people. I enjoy the staff. I enjoy the plants. I enjoy the fashion side of it. I enjoy all of that. And that's what I'm going to miss the most, all of those things. People say, what are you going to do? Do you know what? I've got no idea. I'm going to take 6 months off and I'll see where I land. See how I feel. What can I cope with? Am I driving my kids mad? Am I driving my girlfriend mad? Probably. So I might do something. People say, are you going to keep doing the radio? Look, I will do some of it. I have told them I'm going to stop, but they're not listening to me, I think. So I'm not sure what will happen there either. So the business will close this month, and then we'll tidy up the site, and then we'll work out what we'll do with the site. So yeah, that's what's going to happen. Is there any questions? And of course, I'm not going to answer any about olives or lemons. Lemons. Why are my citrus leaves going yellow?
Just to start it off, I've just got to put in the part that I see from being involved in Gawler all of my life and my children. And the part that I've always loved about it is, you're going to tear up, I can see.
Oh God, I better have some more water.
I know so many of the children that have grown up through our families and the people that lived in Gawler that have spent time and worked in the garden centre at your place. And that's a thing that's gone through. It's part of the families of Gawler have done it. It's always, and I know many children that are now adults that have spent the time working there.
Yeah.
And you've always made them welcome. It's always been a spectacular part of their growing ups. So I've always seen the centre as part of Gawler's history and part of Gawler's passion, which is you've let us in to see a little bit of the passion of your family in the garden centre. It's a very special thing for us to see. So thank you very much.
That's all right.
Have we got any questions? Sorry, yes. Thank you very much. Now, have we got questions? So I'll just assist Milton with questions. Have we got anyone that wants to Got anything you want to ask? Di?
Thank you, Di.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Look, I'm going to miss everyone too, because not only do I treat my staff as family, but a lot of my customers are too. Do you know I have customers that come in every day, or 2 or 3 times a week. They're all coming and hugging me and crying and, you know. Yeah, I know, it's sad. And, you know, we have employed a lot of local people. I was actually trying to work out the other day how many people have we employed over the years. At any one time at the moment we employ 30 people, but in our production years there was anywhere between 60 to 100 people employed on that site. So there's been a lot of people. Some I keep in contact with regularly.
We need to make a list, Paul.
A list of all the people that work there?
Yes.
Oh gosh.
Yes, well,
Yeah,
that's
right.
You've been asked by
I'll get the payroll person onto that.
Just one question. When you had the plants put into paint tins,
Yeah.
how did you get them out? If you had the paint lip on the end, how did you pull them out?
Yeah, they cut them out. They cut them out.
Oh.
They used an axe, usually. That's how I saw people doing it. Because they were the big paint tins, the 10 litres or whatever they are. And I remember they were always green. So were they painting warships with it or something?
I noticed in one of the slides the ficus in the car park
Oh, yes.
were about 2 metres high. When did you plant those?
So I planted those when I first started there in 1978. So they're people think they're Moreton Bay figs. They're not. They're Ficus decora, which is the common ficus that you use as an indoor plant. But of course it grows beautiful. And what lovely trees are. These are the first cafe tables we had. I had Marisha Matthews paint them for us. And they were, I'm glad Margaret had that photo. They were the original chairs we had in the cafe as well. So it's changed a lot. Yes, that was a local artist. Marisha, her father had the Gawler Mill, didn't he? Yeah. She's a really good artist now. She does wonderful work. That's these are about 25 or 30 years old. These photos. Yes, that glass house in there was a state of the art at the time. It was called a right light. You never had to spray them with whitewash. It was angled so the sun came in at the right time. The place was originally, when Dad built it, right back in the 60s, was designed to recycle water. Okay, and it's still, all the water runs to a holding dam. So he was ahead of his time like that. So over the years, fashion has changed, the products has changed. It's funny, you know, indoor plants are high fashion now. When I first started in the 70s, indoor plants was the thing. And it's taken 30 or 40 whatever years to come back.
Well, it wouldn't help, I suppose, in today, with the estates that are being built now, they haven't got gardeners in the back.
It's
They've
a,
got small 8 feet before they get to the next fence.
that's right.
So that's not helped you in any way.
No.
In other words, the growing plants and growing roses have disappeared.
That's
the
right.
succulents, as you said earlier, have come up more
Yeah.
because you can have them inside and outside, and they don't take up too much room.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
What we've seen over the years, fashion changes I've said, but the houses have got bigger and the blocks have got smaller. So that's been put pressure on the gardens and plants and trees. You're dead right. And that was one of the reasons why the outdoor furniture was so important. Because the outdoor room, the patio, is actually now become the most important room in the house. The outdoor area. You know, the barbecue, the pizza oven, the furniture. Gone are the days where you can have you know, daggy plastic chairs. You know, I'm having Paul come around and Heather for a barbecue. Oh, they can't have them sitting on that. They've got to have something really plush. They're going to talk about me when they leave. Oh, geez, he sat us down on this old wooden table. Do you know what I mean? But that's serious. You know, so what people spend per square metre now is much higher. But the product has changed. And of course, once you do it, it's like decorating a room. Once it's decorated, that's it. It's not a garden that you change. You might change it like a room every 5 or 6 years.
I haven't understood clearly what's changed. Have taxes gone up, or has the market changed and gone down, or have you changed?
I think all of that has changed, actually. So, taxes have gone up. Our land tax bill used to be about $3,000 a year. The next year went to 6. After that it went to 12 the year after. Then it went to 24, and you can follow the maths. That was 20 years ago.
Have you got anybody, you own the land, don't you?
Yes.
Have you had anybody interested, once you've gone, to buy that land?
I vet phone calls several times a week.
Right, all right. I hate to think what's going on there, but still, it won't be a nursery, will it?
It won't be a nursery.
Yeah.
It won't be a nursery. Well, I shouldn't. I doubt it. I doubt it.
Never say never.
Never say never. You know, there's a gentleman in Sydney called Simon Ainsworth. You may know the Ainsworth family. They own Aristocrat Gambling, so which is a bit of a nasty one for me. But anyway, Simon, the son of the father Ainsworth, was given $60 million as a gift. Said, go and play with that, and he built this beautiful garden centre in the middle of Sydney. So it's not impossible.
Perhaps you can keep the cafe going.
Yes.
I noticed you didn't give Bunnings a bit of a push there, but they call theirs garden centres, and they wouldn't have grown their own.
Who's that, sorry?
Bunnings.
Oh, Bunnings. No, Bunnings don't grow anything.
Did they actually buy off you or a nursery?
Yeah, they buy off of... they have a group of 200 nurseries in Australia that they buy from. And I have to be careful what I say here. But you've seen what's happening with Coles and Woolworths? That's happening with Bunnings and the nurseries. They are ruthless and have closed many businesses down, and many people that I know, some of them have been in the business for 70 years and now gone broke. It's not very fair, no.
Did they have a big impact though?
Of course.
Plant-wise, selling?
Yes.
Buying and selling?
Yes, of course.
Being so close to you even?
Yeah, yes it does, because the more competition you have, the less you're going to buy. And of course, one of their catch cries, you buy it 10% cheaper if you can find it elsewhere. They'll sell it to you 10% cheaper. Yeah. Now, that is designed to put us out of business. Yeah. What else is it designed for? Yeah. But they don't know plants, and you know, when you go to their buyers, you know that they know nothing about the business. They know nothing about the product. They are actually quite scared of the product because they don't know anything about it. But because of that, they treat the product with disrespect. And unfortunately, having them in the marketplace devalues our product. Look, I'm going to be very frank here. It's not... Do you think I haven't heard of Vadoulis are expensive? I've heard that all my life. Vadoulis are expensive. But I can guarantee you, what we sell the product for is a very fair and reasonable price with what we offer. because we offer a service. Now, people come to us for the advice and go and buy it at Bunnings. I don't think that's very fair, but it happens. Okay, they come, oh no, I've got that in the shed. Yeah, I've heard that a million times. Of course you've got it in the shed. But that's very disappointing because it costs us to have staff there to help people, to give you the advice. The staff have got, and I've got one here, thank you Jess for coming, they have years of knowledge, years of passion to help you. That's not free. It's not free. But everyone wants it free. I've always said for many years. And in fact, when I first started, a few years after I started in the 70s, I noticed very quickly that people didn't value our product as it should be. And I thought, why is that? Now, there's several reasons, I think, because gardening, if you go back to the 60s and 50s, there was something mum and dad helped you with. Here, I've got this old plant, poke it in there. Here's a cutting, poke it in there. So gardening may have started off being something you didn't pay for, or you didn't pay much for. So that's one reason. But the second reason, and I think more relevant today, is I think what people don't realise, plants are Australian made. They're not made in China or Vietnam. The pots are made in Australia. The labels are made in Australia. The plants are propagated in Australia. They're grown in Australia and they're transported in Australia. Now, if you relate that to any other product that is Australian made and then compare it with the Chinese made product, you can see why plants prices are dearer, because they're all Australian made. Let me give you an example. There's speakers that are made in Adelaide, really good quality speakers. They're probably $1,000 each. But you can go to Harvey Norman and buy a speaker that looks similar for $200. That's what I'm talking about. So these are made here. The people are employed here to grow them. So the perceived value of them is not there because people don't realise that. They see everything else is made in China and going down, and they see plants going up. In fact, plants are actually cheaper now than they've ever been. When my father was growing citrus for John Lascaux, it used to cost 3 weeks' wages to buy a lemon tree. You can buy a lemon tree for $50 now, 1 hour's wages. Things have changed a lot like that.
Right, any more questions?
I've been coming to your nursery since 1969. I arrived in Adelaide from England in January '68, and I lived on Bennington Hospital for a month before I bought a place of a deposit down, which I believe $500 for a $7,000 home.
Would you like to do that now?
And at one time you could come over the top. There was no building, no holding. You could come from there over the hill into Gawler. And the house I bought had grass knee high. It took me a fortnight to get rid of all that. And someone suggested, my father was a rose grower. He was a champion rose grower. When he came to Adelaide, eventually he put nothing but roses in his garden. Came from your place. And the point I'm trying to make is that I wanted to grow roses, so I went to Knight's. If you remember,
Oh yes,
Knight's,
yes, of course.
And I bought some from there. And I said, where can I buy some, plants, bushes, shrubs? And he said, well, there's just a garden centre opened up down the road, about 8 miles down the road, a place called Gawler. I said, whereabouts in Gawler? He said, you can't miss it, opposite the race.
No, there was nothing else there.
Yeah, there was nothing else there.
No.
So I came down there, and ever since, I've been buying, I moved house 7 times. And I
Thank
had
you.
7 buildings. And I bought everything from yourself. What I'm trying to say is, you might pay a little bit extra, but you get value for money.
Yes, that's
I
right.
learned a lesson. Buying from Bunnings, you can invariably take them back, get a refund, because they don't last. Are they force fed? Whereas yours grow naturally with care. I've never lost a plant yet, or a tree, or a rose bush, if I bought them from your place.
Thank you.
But from Bunnings, it's a little bit iffy.
I must have sold you the wrong ones then.
Have you set him into the crowd?
It's a $20 later.
Jumping away from the business itself, can I ask you a question? My rose trees, I've got about 15 of them. I'm still getting buds on them.
Yeah.
They're not opening up at the moment, though they're quite large. And July is the time for pruning. Do I just prune them?
Yep.
And even though they've got a possible flower, just get rid of them,
Yeah.
just cut them back.
So you need to set them up for the season coming.
Yeah.
So
I just wondered
it's
with flowers on,
yeah,
whether
you have to sacrifice those odd flowers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
thank you.
that's all right.
All right, I'll just
There goes your $20.
Yeah. When there's a can of worms, I think everyone will be asking questions about plants from now on. So.
About lemons. If I had $1 for every lemon question I answered, I'd be a wealthy man.
Okay.
My orchards are starting to go yellow. Why is that?
All right. Once again, thank you very much, Milton, for giving us a
Thank you.
So,
Again, I thank you all for coming out and listening to the story. I hope it's perhaps helped some myths that you may have heard or whatever, so I really appreciate it. So thank you.
No. And on behalf of the Gawler History team and our members, we'd like to present you with a basket of awesomeness.
Oh gosh, that's beautiful. Gee, there's some calories in that. There's a lemon in there. Actually, I've got something for myself as well. I know this. Who's the secretary? The secretary always does so much work that they deserve something. Oh, Heather, come here.
Oh, darling.
I couldn't come empty-handed.